So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is Miffy Maximilian, and we're doing the Becoming Your Best Self class. I hope everybody's done this before with us, but anyway, welcome.
I haven't done it before with you.
Thank you.
Oh, you haven't? Okay.
No.
So it's really nice, actually. We've got a couple of new people today because for this class in particular, it doesn't matter which class you come in on, each of our kind of meeting together will be on a standalone topic. Together they all make sense, but also even if you just manage to get to this one, it's going to make a whole lot of sense. The Becoming Your Best Self course, it's based on Buddhist psychology, and I actually put it together at the request of some university students who were trying to keep their head above water and not be stressed, and also keep a hold of their goals and their passions for life without them being corrupted. And in the academic environment, it can be very competitive and you lose that initial joy that got you into studying the topic in the first place. So that was kind of how the class came about, and then it grew into something else. So hopefully it's going to be relevant for the non-religious in our, a secular world, how to actually live a good life and be authentic, so that regardless how things turn out on the outside, you're going to feel okay in your heart. But also the Buddhist psychology can take us a lot further than just making do just this week or this year or this life. It has a really long-term goal, and the benefits can be incredibly long-term for ourselves, for the whole community, for the world. So hopefully we'll be able to see how it fits in today. What we've already covered that's given us a bit of context in the first class, setting the scene, was about happiness and how instinctually we want to feel safe, we want to be happy, we want to have some kind of meaning in life, we want to feel worthwhile, that ad, because you're worth it. So, but how do we get there? And most of the time our attention is just sucked in by kind of trying to be comfortable, trying to adjust everything from the senses at the expense of our inner long-term sense of well-being. So we looked at the 3 types of happiness. If you're there at that class, if you remember, we had the happiness that what we get from the world, from the senses, the happiness what we give to the world when we contribute to society, when we help others, and also from states of deep concentration, which we'll go into a little bit more today. And then the happiness that is cumulative, that comes from within, the stages, the happiness of the stages on the path to enlightenment. And that's the kind of happiness that we actually take from life to life, because it's our inner growth, it's what we become. And last week in our second class, we looked at, well, what corrupts all of our good intentions? We might start off well, but things degenerate. Why does this happen? So it's usually because of the 8 worldly concerns, or the unstable concerns that we have in the world, concerns about status anxiety, just wanting to have pleasant experiences and being averse to difficulty at the expense of our long-term goals, being really influenced by what people think of us, and being unable to do what we know is the right thing if people are going to think badly, being unable to bear criticism or failure. All of those things come into the 8 worldly concerns. And what I've found that they do is that they ruin our best intentions. And so then what we're going to have a look at today is what's called the 3 higher trainings. So these are 3 things that don't come naturally, that we actually have to train in. Because even though we have at the core of our being good qualities, natural kindness, compassion, an ability to develop our wisdom, to see things clearly, how we get there doesn't come naturally, as we know. You know, by now we should have got it. So that's why they're called trainings. So the 3 higher trainings, they're a skill that we have to learn and practice, and then they're incredibly helpful for this life and for the future, for what comes next, actually for all the way to liberation and enlightenment. So they definitely make our life better now. They're skills that we absolutely need for life, or we just can't get through. They overcome many of the factors that cause disturbing emotions and distress in our life. And they can completely solve our problems forever. So if there's any things that you're going to learn, it's these 3 higher trainings. That's the one to put your energy into. I'd almost call them skills for humanity. How to be a good human. So let's just take a moment to set our motivation. We can do it in a relaxed manner. So just sitting comfortably and becoming present in the room where you are. A little bit of effort into keeping your spine straight so that you've got this attitude of alertness, but still feeling nice and grounded in the chair. And happy to be here and have put the effort into getting here, doing the organizing. And then remember, why are you here? What was the deciding factor that got you here? Sometimes it's quite an immediate thing. It might be an immediate issue or an immediate goal, something you want to find out about. So whatever it is that got you to the seat, remember that, bring that to your mind. And then we can make that slightly more like long-term. So the long-term consequences of being able to achieve that, the long-term beneficial effects on our mind. What are we hoping for? And what if we didn't put any limit on what our goal was? What if we just go for the big one and think, well, what we all want is complete liberation from problems and suffering. And we also want to bring everyone with us because it's unbearable to see the suffering of others. How can we leave them behind? So this really big-hearted attitude to bring to this class. So that's one side, you know, we've got kindness and curiosity. So that's the side of kindness, the big-hearted attitude. And the curiosity side, that's the wisdom side. And how do we start developing wisdom? By enjoying it. So a spirit of curiosity, of it's okay not to know, of how very interesting this can be. We can develop our wisdom, our realizations, because that's what supports our whole practice in our life. So with this motivation, that's both personal and global, I'm going to get the screen share up and we can get started with our wonderful topic, 3 higher trainings. So why are we here? The 3 higher trainings, they make our life better now, and with these trainings, we can completely overcome problems, all problems, and end our suffering forever. Not just make do, not just think, oh, I hope I just have a little bit of suffering, but, you know, to complete, how do we eliminate problems and suffering? The 3 higher trainings. So they're called higher because their import, their benefit is for more than just this life. It's for future lives as well. They have the ability to liberate us. Now, if you're not a Buddhist, or if you're on the fence about rebirth and reincarnation, you can also think it's for future generations. They cut the root of suffering forever. So the image here, or the analogy that I find incredibly useful and that they use for the trainings, is that we have our ethics is like the body. We have to embody our ethics, isn't it? It's not enough just to say, I have these values. We have to embody our values or it's meaningless. So that's like having a very strong body. Ethics. Concentration is the two strong arms. It's what holds our mind on the topic. And wisdom is the axe that cuts through the root of suffering. When we develop our ethics, when we have a strong body, when we're fit, we have confidence, it's actually happiness creating. We feel harmonious within ourselves. How do we overcome distraction? It's by developing our concentration. It's a skill that we can develop. And distraction means not just distraction of not being able to concentrate on anything, but distraction also means how so much of our time is just sucked into life maintenance, and days go by and years go by and we look at our life and we start panicking, oh my God, what have I done with my life? So there's the long-term distraction as well. And we destroy all the negative seeds that ripen into suffering. We destroy those seeds with wisdom. It's the only thing that destroys those seeds. So I'll just say a little bit more about these 3 higher trainings. So this is from a fantastic book called Practicing the Path by Yangtze Rinpoche. It's a lamb rim book. It's got a cover on it. It's usually a white cover. And it's a great beginner's lamb rim because it's put together from teachings given to Westerners. So it's very contemporary and very accessible. So if you're going to have a lamb rim book to start with, this is the one. So just as the introduction for the 3 high trainings, he says, at the moment, we are bound to cyclic existence because we are under the control of our minds, and our minds are under the control of our delusions. As a result, we find ourselves in a state of complete distraction all the time, consistently unfocused and unable to apply ourselves to the meaningful pursuit of a spiritual path. The method to overcome this unfortunate state is the practice of the first of the 3 higher trainings, the training in ethics. However, in order to completely subdue the mind, accomplishing the higher training in ethics alone is not sufficient. So it's not enough just to be a good person. We must also develop our minds in meditative concentration. Without the basis of single-pointed placement and the strength of meditative equipoise, we will be unable to stabilize our realizations and unable to focus our minds on virtue. And eventually we'll find that developing the mind in the higher training in ethics and the higher training in concentration is also not sufficient. In order to free our minds completely from the control of the delusions and their seeds, we'll also need to practice the training in higher wisdom. Okay, so I thought the order that we could do things in was start with the tricky one first, wisdom, then talk about concentration, and then do the easy, really juicy one, ethics, at the end. So let's get the hard one out of the way, and also we'll touch a little bit more on this idea of cognitive fusion that we started talking about last week. So I'll just get the screen share again now. The higher training in wisdom. So a quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which I really love. We are at the center of all of our troubles. It's therefore best to work at understanding our true nature first. So this is very excellent advice, because rather than just getting all theoretical about stuff or trying to figure out some philosophical idea, let's start where it really matters, which is our own experience. our own troubles. We're at the center of them. We're the experiencer of them. So we've got to start with all of our wisdom harnessed to our experience. When we're developing as a human being, just being a good person, just love and compassion, as we know, it's not enough. We need to have a balance. Otherwise, we end up with what, Lama Yeshe called idiot compassion, where we have really good intentions, but they don't necessarily work out. What happens if we don't develop our wisdom is that we have a whole lot of assumptions that we don't know that we have. And then what happens is that how things first appear to us, we think are real and true. So I'm just going to put these things up now, and then we'll go into it a little bit more depth. So again, from His Holiness, all phenomena arise by the collection of many conditions together. Because of the collection of many conditions, there is no inherence. So normally we just experience situations, and what we are aware of in the situation, we think that's it, that's the whole reality. Very rarely do we wonder what's the backstory of that person, or where are they coming from, or what happened to them at the beginning of the day for them to be acting like this or like that. So we forget that there is a whole collection of conditions happening to end up with this experience. Because there is a collection of many conditions, there's no inherence, there is no inherent truth. It all depends how we look at it. What we generally do is confuse the dual nature of reality. We confuse relative and ultimate. So this is kind of my take on it, how I figure it out in my own mind, that because what we first see, it's a relative truth, but we think that's it. We think that's real and true. So we've confused it with the ultimate truth. And because of this, because we start off with the wrong assumption, everything else is going to be wrong as well. It's the root of all of our suffering. So the key problems and things, everything, do not exist in the way that they first appear. So it's not being nihilistic. It's not saying things do not exist at all, but they don't exist in the way that they first appear. So what normally happens is that we see something, it appears pleasant, for instance, then we think the pleasantness comes from the thing. As B. Alan Wallace says, the happiness isn't in the things. The happiness is in us experiencing, isn't it? But we see something pleasant, we think the happiness comes from the thing. Then we impute all sorts of other qualities onto it, that it's better than it is, that it's permanent, it'll be there forever. We don't know we're doing that. It's just this kind of assumptions that come along with it. And then we grasp at it. We want more. So we looked at this in that happiness class quite a lot. And then when it changes, then we create a lot of negativity chasing after it. So also when we look at ourself, we think, oh, this is me. Often we'll think our body is me. So when our body starts aging or getting, fat and deteriorated, we start feeling bad about ourselves. Instead of thinking about the function of our body, what we can do with one, have a life. We also think that our emotions are us. If we're suffering depression or anxiety or trauma, we think that's us. That's me and real, and there's nothing I can do about it. Whereas actually we're the sum of all of our experiences. We're the sum of our education, our status in society, our gender, our beliefs, the things that have happened to us, how we identify, our health. All of these things are those conditions that play into our experience of who we are. And how we feel we are, we think that's real and true. And so then it needs maintenance, and we want people to look at us in a particular way. And if someone criticizes us or misunderstands us, we cannot bear it. And we cannot bear it because it shakes us. and it shakes us because it's on an unstable foundation. So that way we're confusing the relative and the ultimate. And actually, when we realize that what we are is this collection of circumstances and events and reactions, that gives us a lot more flexibility. And then we have an option to choose how we view ourselves. So it shows us the way to freedom, to become free of those constraints. So another thing that happens, of course, with believing the appearances. Now, it's appearances, it's not just eyes, it's believing our first experience to be the real and true one. So many of us think, for instance, pain is bad, don't we? Hardly anyone would say, oh, pain is good. But yet, when we dig below the surface, we can see that having a pain system in our body is actually protection. If we don't have a pain system, like there are people that are born without a pain system, and they're a nightmare for their parents because there's no way they can protect them. So the first appearance, pain is bad. But actually, when we look below the surface, it's very useful. And doctors, in fact, will say, they'll ask you where the pain is because that's the only way they can figure out how to help you. So in a way, just like when we go to the movies, and we go through an experience. For sure, we might cry, we might laugh, we'll remember it, and we know it's not true. Nevertheless, we had an experience. It affected us. So our life is like that as well. And just like a whole lot of people can go to a movie and all come out with a different idea of what it was like. Some liked it, some didn't, some got this from it, some got that from it. The same with our life. There's no inherence. There's a lot more flexibility. So there is there's a reason why we get caught, you know, because how come we're all very happy to watch a movie and there's no problem there? We know there's no inherence, and we also know that it's great being involved. So why do we do that? And why do we get stuck in our life? And it's because of this thing, cognitive fusion. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of this, and then I'll open up for questions. But I just thought, and as Glenn Spencer says, hey kids, don't do cognitive fusion. So what's happening when we're advised to, you know, not believe the appearances is to don't do cognitive fusion. Cognitive fusion means that we believe things to exist the way that they appear. So here's one, fusing the behavior with the person. So if you've ever been to a supermarket and there's a child chucking a tantrum and a poor mortified parent cowering in the background. So you might think evil child, but we know the child is not evil, even though we might feel it. With grown-ups, it's a little more difficult. We might think bad person, but actually modern psychology, everybody, advises us. It's a person acting badly, not a bad person. Is it a bad child or a suffering child? You know, is it a rude person? You know, as if they came out of the womb rude, or is it a person overcome with frustration, overcome with anger? So it's much easier to get at this with children because we can forgive them easier, you know, but adults, it's exactly the same thing. So it's not a bad child, but a child with bad behavior. Cognitive fusion puts them together. And actually, someone who works in early childhood in a kindergarten or a school will say it's not actually even a child with bad behavior. It's an unhappy child expressing aversion, suffering. So that takes it a step deeper. And from a Buddhist point of view, it's not even just an unhappy child expressing aversion or an unhappy child expressing suffering. It's a potential Buddha screaming to be liberated. So you see how just by using our words in a different way, we have a completely different experience. So from a Buddhist point of view, any experience of suffering is evidence of our Buddha nature trying to burst through. So cognitive fusion, we are in bondage to it. We've got a couple of variations of it. So one of them is called cognitive deficit. In a difficult situation, we can't see any benefits. So, you know, we cut ourselves off from change. For instance, anyone who's terrified of going to the dentist, all we can think about is how the pain and the suffering that comes from the dentist, and we cannot see that it can help us regain our health. It may even save us from septicemia. It may save us from blood poisoning and death, which still happens in the modern world because people have a fear of the dentist. So cognitive deficit is a psychological way of saying aversion. Being so overwhelmed by the negative experience of something, by our fears, that we cannot see any benefit. And we're so overwhelmed that then we think it is bad. We think a dentist is bad. Whereas actually it's just an unpleasant thing, but it's very good to go to a dentist. Same thing happens with exercise. You know, it's why I don't do exercise or go to the gym or anything like that, because the discomfort to me overrides the benefit. So I have a cognitive deficit. And the other one, on the other hand, cognitive hyperactivity, otherwise known as attachment. So this is also something that gets me in a pleasant situation. We overvalue all the enjoyable qualities. You know, so here's a nice martini. Well, 3 martinis must be 3 times as good. And so we're just focusing on how good. And because we think that our happiness comes from out there, then we think the more the better. And then how many times have I woken up shocked that I have a hangover? Like, what, again? How many times, how many decades did this happen to me before I put 2 and 2 together? So cognitive hyperactivity in a pleasant situation, overvaluing the qualities, can happen in other instances as well. In a less jokey kind of way, but like, for instance, if you're in a relationship and you're always keeping the peace with your partner, always smoothing things over. So it does keep the peace in the short term, but in the long term, it has quite disastrous results because big issues are not dealt with. And someone who has a short temper, you know, and so you start walking on eggshells so that they don't blow their top, then they have no opportunity to deal with their temper, and we become an enabler of that. So the cognitive hyperactivity of overvaluing the temporary and immediate peace at the expense of the long-term one. So this can happen, for instance, if you live if you're the one in the family that does the housework, you want a clean house, so you do all of the housework and you just wish everybody else would do their share. So the way to get everyone else to do their share is for you to stop doing the housework and just deal with a messy, grotty house for quite a long time. But we don't, do we? So we have this cognitive hyperactivity. We overvalue the meaning and benefit of a clean house at the expense of training our family how to live as a capable human being. So then you have, you know, people in their 20s up into their 30s, they leave home and they don't know how to look after themselves. It's like we've grown up invalids. They've got to go straight from home to the old people's home, you know, because they don't know how to do anything. And why? Because we had this cognitive hyperactivity, this attachment to the short-term kind of the short-term benefit or the pleasant experience. So all of this is to do with the wisdom things and how we get caught out. Now, I'd like to know, do you have questions? Who has a question for me? Someone wave at me and ask me a question. There's got to be a question, right? I can't have convinced you all already. Have any, can you think of any examples that's happened from your own life of this cognitive hyperactivity, or what was the other one, the cognitive deficit, overvaluing or undervaluing, where you get caught out?
I think for me, it's all the time. It's all the time. So it's constant. Doesn't stop. And I know I bring mindfulness to it. I practice all sorts of the way I try to change the way I think about issues.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult because there are these habits and patterns that are just so stuck in there.
That's right. You're right. They're very ingrained. They happen all the time. Yeah. And they happen all the time because of the way that we just believe the appearances, and then the momentum of it is completely overwhelming. But you're right, how you said, so then you try and practice mindfulness about it, because that's why the next thing, concentration, is so crucial. We can see why we need that as a skill. So yeah, you're definitely on the right track. So let's have a look what we can do to develop our wisdom, how to get started as beginners, you know, because we've got to start somewhere where it's going to be useful for us. So wisdom is actually re-education. Just like with little kiddies, how you first ask them, where does milk come from? And they say it comes from the milk bottle, you know, and then we educate them. Well, actually, there's a story behind that. And then we tell them about cows. And then they get all interested in the cows and the fields and want to go on a field trip. So it's all about re-education, not believing the appearances. It's exactly the same thing that we've got to do. So in terms of realizations, developing our realizations, to remind ourselves there is a discrepancy between appearance and reality, and to remind ourselves about this. To remind ourselves about cognitive fusion and try and notice when it's happening. Then to work on our own mind first rather than abstract philosophy. So there is a tendency when you first come to Buddhism to just go, I just want the quick, easy way. Oh, I know, let's read all about emptiness and we'll just get that. Or let's just get calm abiding and I don't have to worry about the rest. Or let's just find out about how things really exist or how they don't exist, at the expense of working on our own heart and our own relationships and the life that we lead. So actually, we've got to tie it all to our experience, and we have to start off like that, because if we don't, if we end up being just academic, we'll get ourselves into a real pickle where you become, it's like the curse of the intelligent. You become more and more knowledgeable, but more and more miserable. And why that happens is because we think about philosophy unmoored from our own experience. So we have to work on our mind, philosophy in relation to our own experience, philosophy in relation to our own mind and our own relationships. All the time, try and bridge it. So every time that you're reading about these deep philosophical things, continuously ask yourself, how does that apply to me? How would I use that in my life this week? How would I express that? What's an example in my own life? It's so important to do that. so that we don't end up being very knowledgeable and very cranky and very miserable. Because I know a lot of people like that, you know, having being brought up in Buddhism, in Dharma centers, I've seen people go off on that track, and it's really, really sad. And wisdom of selflessness, no inherent self. You know who you are, it all depends. Now, this is a great one, because just recently there's been a whole lot of talk in the news and social media about, for instance, gender fluidity. How gender is not just a set thing. If you've got long hair, you're a girl. And if you've got short hair, you're a boy, you know, which is how we work out whether kids are boys or girls. Gender fluidity, it's not just about there is one thing or the other thing. That's just actually been a projection of ours. In nature, there is gender fluidity. There are animals that change gender from one to the other depending on the weather. There are animals that have both genders, that have no gender. There are different gender roles. And now the skies are beginning to clear, and we're being able to see that's the same with human beings. There is no definitive gender. There is gender fluidity. There's a spectrum. So that's what no inherent self means, that we have a general identification. I'm this or I'm that. I'm a man, or I'm a woman, or I'm non-specific. But it's just a general working, as Venerable Robina says, working hypothesis. You know, it's a general thing. But when you look in deeply, there is a whole spectrum. And ultimately what it depends on is what we identify as. So there is no inherent gender. There's no inherent self. And the more we can remind ourselves of that, the more relaxed we will be, the less intimidated, the less grasping at certainty. We'll be able to relax and go, okay, I'm somewhere along on the spectrum there. And it can change. And, you know, with gender, for instance, you can identify as a woman, but still have a man's body. And instead of that being a source of continuous pain, you can come to terms with it and go, well, you know what, because there is no inherence, I can identify as a woman regardless of what body I have. So there's a lot more scope to relax. It also means, you know, as a woman, I can try and act in the gender specific role or not, instead of taking it personally. So it gives us a lot more room to move. The wisdom of selflessness, it's just such a relief. So then the other side of things, to continue on with our screen share, is to make sure that we get our information from authentic teachings. So we live in what's called a post-truth world. To quote William Burroughs, you know, he said, nothing is true, everything is permitted. So that's what a post-truth world is where there is so many sources of information and they're all contradictory, that none of it makes sense anymore. There's no consequences to anything. Everything is permitted. The common way that we think about this was like, you know, anything that we don't like that we hear, we just go, oh, fake news. That's part of a post-truth world. So what do? We have to check our sources. We really have to check, where do we get our information from? And if we are overwhelmed by the 8 worldly concerns, we won't be able to check our sources. We'll just believe the things that we like to hear. That's also a post-truth world. So anything that we agree with or we like, we'll go, that's true. And anything that is uncomfortable, that we don't like, we'll go, that's fake. We can see the disaster that comes from that. So checking our sources means that we've got to make sure that we expose ourselves to forms of information that we don't necessarily agree with or like. and become aware of how we're making our choices, not just on this visceral level of, oh, I don't like it, so it can't be true, don't want to know. Most of the time, even though we pride ourselves with being modern human beings, all of our information and all of our reasoning is emotive. It's emotional reasoning. It's not rational reasoning. And the more stressed we become, the more emotive we are, until when we're really stressed, there's no way we can be rational. There's no way we can use reasoning. It just doesn't feature into things because we're so overwhelmed. So we have to retrain both our thinking and our feeling. So at least when we are emotionally reasoning, I don't want to hear about that because it's too awful. We recognize it as emotional reasoning and go, okay, clearly I need some space before I can look at that situation. So retraining our thinking and feeling. Oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. I hope this recovers. It's like a kiddie drawing a little house. You know, at first when we're trying to think about the world, we draw this little rudimentary house and it's a little embarrassing. We're trying to figure things out and we're just taking these baby steps. And it takes all of our effort just to put a few things together. But after a while, we become more skilled as we train. And then we can end up drawing a beautiful architectural design. So the other thing is to constantly use our words to reframe a situation. So just like, you know, when we're talking about, oh, a bad child or an evil child, no, child behaving badly. No, actually a child expressing suffering. Actually a potential Buddha bursting forth, screaming to be liberated. So all of that, our state of mind changes by how we use our words. So just like your mummy used to say, you know, use your words, dear. This is our key out of it for developing wisdom, to use our words and to be very specific with how we say things, because it will help our mind follow along and become more discriminatory. It's all in the framing. So now, before we go on, that's kind of the end of the wisdom section. Comments or questions? It's a lot to take in. Can you see how it's how you can start applying it in day-to-day life? Hopefully.
Oh, I can go again.
Okay, Ivana, go for it.
I'm on a roll today. I prefer to stay quiet and invisible, but anyhow. I don't know how to live in this world, Miffy, because everything you're saying, I relate to it. And for example, working in the area of gender studies for decades, this is like a no-brainer. I know research behind it. We know research behind, you know, how to create social change. You don't go into a country and do military intervention and then disappear. We know about all that. I just don't know how to live in this world with the knowledge that I've got from Buddhism, practicing ethics, compassion, all that sort of stuff. That's my difficulty. So then I can disappear and hide, and that's easier for me. But then I know that's not long-term solution. So any tips there?
Ivana, that you've really summed it up. I don't know how to live in this world, and that's right. And I like how you say that, because it has the emotional weight behind it, that we want to know how to live in this world. But that's the thing, that's what samsara or cyclic existence is. It's not quite right. It is disjointed. It is out of kilter. And as we kind of start investigating this, we can see how we perpetuate that out of kilter. So really the thing about wisdom, how it can help us live in the world, is it unifies our overarching experience with an insight into it. So just on a very basic level, I get so upset with, you know, the anti-vaxxers and the anti-lockdown people and everything. And I get so frustrated and upset that I actually start disliking them. And then little warning bells go up and I go, well, you know, I'm supposed to be a good Buddhist. This shouldn't, why is this happening? And so why it's happening is I'm expecting these people to be rational and act in their own best interests, and they're not. Why? Because they're acting emotionally. They're so overwhelmed by fear, uncertainty, disenfranchisement, pride, you know, hatred, arrogance, all of those things come into this perfect storm and overwhelm them till they act in their own worst best interests and in the worst interests of our society. But if you recognize there's that cognitive fusion happening there, where, for instance, people go, a lockdown is bad, it feels bad, I hate it, it's making me unhappy, therefore it is bad and we shouldn't have a lockdown. That's cognitive fusion, and that's how overwhelming it is. So if we can understand that, what I've found, if you go, okay, this is emotive reasoning, it's not rational reasoning, then you can relax because you know where they're coming from. And now it's like they're just like me. Just like me, they want certainty. They don't want to suffer. Just like me, they're sick of it. They're sick of samsara. They cannot bear it anymore, just like me. So now we've got common ground. So that's the beginning part. So from a Buddhist point of view, wisdom supports everything. Wisdom supports our compassion. It's the one that holds everything, our wisdom, because it sustains us through the emotional ups and downs. So that's the beginning part. But the rest, let's get into the rest. How do we sustain this? Well, how we sustain it is with concentration and ethics. So let's have a look at concentration. The higher training in concentration. So let's have a look. What concentration is? It's a mental factor that is capable of abiding one-pointedly on an object of virtue without distraction. So it's a mental skill of being able to, you know, to focus one-pointedly without distraction. But here's the kicker, on an object of virtue. So this is the difference between higher training in concentration and just ordinary concentration. Because higher training in concentration means that we can focus on an object of virtue is what brings happiness, peace, stability, wisdom. If it's ordinary concentration, it's like you can be perfectly concentrated how to be a fantastic shoplifter or a sniper. You know, a cat that is stalking a mouse has single-pointed concentration, but it's not a higher training in concentration because that's not an object of virtue. So there's a real difference here, that concentration isn't just something out there existing all by itself. It's flavored. And to benefit us, it has to be on an object of virtue, something that brings us sustainable long-term happiness, not just ordinary. So concentration is always informed by ethics. So even mindfulness meditation, for instance, is always informed by ethics, by a purpose. So just focusing on being in the moment, being aware of what you're reading, or being aware of, you know, the room or the temperature, that's just ordinary concentration. There is no virtue in that, and it won't result in happiness. What makes it result in happiness is this purpose behind it of virtue. So the results of the higher training and concentration, when we have even just ordinary concentration, what happens is our mind can become quite relaxed and flexible. Higher training and concentration means that we have not just mental room to move and flexibility, but also physically, we're flexible. Physically, we're relaxed. We don't have tension headaches, for instance. The higher training concentration is naturally blissful. It's a naturally blissful state of mind where we're free of distractions and worldly concerns that we talked about last week. The result is also that it engenders all sorts of other good qualities, have a chance to shine, to come forth. Tolerance, patience, good-heartedness, kindness naturally come forth. And it will benefit others. So there's a little quote here, also, I think it's from Yangtze Rinpoche. By abandoning the objects of our delusions, we decrease the afflictions. By abandoning mental wandering, we increase the practice of virtue. So, decreasing the afflictive states of mind, abandoning the objects of our delusions. So that was a lot to do with what we talked about last week. So abandoning the things that we're excessively attached to or excessively averse to, and whittling away at our afflictions. And if we abandon mental wandering or distraction, actually what happens is we increase our ability to be virtuous, to be a good person, to help others, just naturally comes about. So distractions are both internal and external. And we often think, you know, that thought, oh, just give me some space. Or in my frame of mind, I just need a nap. I just need to have a little siesta just to reboot, you know. So that's kind of an indication that we've been overwhelmed by distraction. We need to create some mental space. If you've ever had that thought, oh, I just want to go on a holiday, it's an indication we need to create some mental space. So we have to make sure that the space that we create is not just external. It's not just a holiday or a quiet place. We've got to create that same space within our mind. So our minds are like cities of distractions, giving rise to countless superstitions and conceptual thoughts. Calming this and focusing on virtuous objects is the basis for cultivating realizations. Without this, it's just intellectual. We still suffer. So if we develop our discrimination, there's a whole lot of amazing benefits that come. Our concentration, sorry. If we can actually focus our mind on a topic or a problem or a situation in a way that we want, without just being anxious, but actually focusing our mind and splashing about in it and thinking about it from this point of view and that point of view, it's much easier for us to discriminate between what to do and what not to do, what's right and what's wrong, because we'll be able to see the situation. The whole purpose for developing concentration is become a better person, a happier human being, and to contribute to society. Otherwise, it's just concentration driven by our afflictions, like wealth, accumulating wealth, ripping everybody else off, or making everybody bow to our opinion and our power. All of that, it's driven by the afflictions. So let's have a look at the practices. This is a really fun bit. So what to do, practices. In terms of the objects, the things, trying to develop physical solitude, free of social media, pets, lists, alcohol or drugs. So we need to have a room of our own. As we know, you need a room of one's own. And so physically, we need to have a space where we feel safe. It's really important. It may not be at our home. It might be somewhere else, like a public library or a park. But we need an environment that we feel safe in, that we can relax, that's our own. And that it's free of social media. It's free of all of that pressure. And it's most important that if you're sitting down to do any form of study or meditation, you leave your phone outside the room. You put it outside the room and close the door. You don't just put it aside or somewhere because it'll always be there as a presence in your mind. You've got to put it outside the room. If your pets are a distraction, which pretty much they are, put them away. Later on, you give them a cuddle. And then you might sit down, you might be free of all of those things, and then suddenly all the sorts of lists, oh, I've got to remember to do that, or oh, I've got to do this, boring, mundane lists. So it might be good to have a little pen and paper by the side there, and as those things pop in your head, write them down so you don't have to think, oh, I hope I remember that later on. Then as you start developing your concentration, you may have better quality distractions, which I've found in retreat is what happens, that finally your mind's becoming free of distractions, and then really good ideas start coming. Really creative ideas, and they're also distractions. So again, write them down and put them aside, so free of lists. And free of alcohol or drugs as well. So it's no good thinking, oh, I'm a bit tired, I'll have a coffee and then sit down and meditate. No, that's not a long-term sustainable solution. Probably have a nap, wake up refreshed, then meditate, then do something that you need to focus on. So this is give yourself some physical space. Then mental solitude, even more important. So mental solitude means being free of rumination on the objects of lust or hatred. And I'll go into that in a moment. Remembering that the real holiday, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, the real holiday is the mind free of delusion. So we yearn for a holiday. That's actually because we're yearning to be free of delusion, free of distractions and worries and anxieties and cravings. So the mental solitude, distancing ourselves from objects of delusion, means that we've got to stop that idea that those things out there will bring us happiness. You know, we're convinced that if I just had that, I'd be happy. That's an object of delusion. So it's not getting rid of the things, it's getting rid of the idea that they're going to bring me happiness. Also, it means that we stop holding so tightly to going, well, they're the people making me upset, or they're the people making me unhappy. The politicians are the ones that are the problem. No, it's my response to the politicians that's the problem. The politicians are us. The politicians aren't the cause of my problem. The politicians are the expression of my problem. They're the expression of us. They're just the kind of the perfect storm to indicate the state of our society. They're not the cause of our society. So this kind of rumination where we believe those initial appearances, we've got to create some solitude from that too. So it's a much deeper kind of thing. Mental discipline is one, changing the channel so that not entertaining like bad housemates, those kinds of thoughts, putting them aside. And so a really nice way to do this, you know, you give yourself a break physically, say for instance from social media or from bad TV. If you end up watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians or all of those things where you just have the beautiful people, just the exposure of that will mean you'll start feeling bad about how you look in your own life. You know, just because of the contact, then it just elicits it triggers all of our negativities. So to stop that trigger, We've got to create a space where we don't have all of that, where we have the Buddhas in front of us to remind us, well, actually the best body, the most alluring, most beautiful, charming, delicious body is the light body of a Buddha. That's the best one. And that's one we can get. The best body is a body that serves others, not what it looks like. Who cares? So why do we care? Because we're sucked into the appearances. So got to give ourselves a break. So make sure you have an environment, no mirror, you know, just pictures of things that really inspire you, not make you depressed about your situation. And, you know, when we have this idea of, I really want to go on a holiday, then go on a holiday or create a holiday at home. So the point of it is to relax our mind. We do need a holiday. And often the first few days of a holiday, you know, when we used to be able to travel, we'd spend all of this money, thousands of dollars getting somewhere, and then sleep for the first couple of days and go, oh my God, that's like a $300 sleep I just had, you know, it better be worth it. But that's why, because we just need a rest. So by all means, please, please have the rest. Let yourself sleep for those 3 days. Just completely go into that kind of, when you just bleem out, your mind becomes completely still, but it's still dull because we're exhausted. And then slowly you start coming up and kind of rejuvenating a bit. And then when you're feeling happy and rested, then you do your meditation, then you do your Dharma study and you read the book, because you're in the optimum frame of mind. So that's the whole purpose of a holiday, is to then be able to do the Dharma and give yourself the real holiday, the mental holiday, free from delusions. And honestly, many of us in the West, we just dive into study and whatever with this really uptight sense. And then we force ourselves to concentrate, and we can do it for a bit, but it's exhausting. And if you keep on forcing yourself, you get the meditator's disease, lung. So lung comes from, and you can get it from meditating or too much study or too much mathematical, whatever, you know, too much in the head, too much forcing your concentration, and you become completely unmoored from reality, disassociated. Disassociated from what's happening in your body, disassociated from your emotions and from the well-being of those around you. You can become quite callous to others. So that comes from concentrating too hard and too fast. And it's not sustainable. What will happen is you might go hard even for several years, but then one day you'll just be over it. You'll stop being a Buddhist. You'll be over whatever the studies are. You know what? Finished. The karma finishes. Because we haven't put the virtue and the joy into it. And just developing our concentration by force alone is not sustainable. And this is something we really get wrong in our Western culture. You know, so actually go for the long term. To make sure that when you study and you're trying to focus your mind, you're also enjoying it as well. The joy comes. How to avoid the laxity and excitement. So the excitement is when our delusions flirt with us. They're very charming. It's like, oh, that's really nice to think about that. And we kind of have a little daydream. And so we think because it feels nice, it's good for us. But actually, that's distraction. It's excitement. It's the allure and the charm. They're flirting with us. They're not good. It's not good bedfellows. To go, oh, yeah, but I'm just concentrating on this thing now. And then the other thing is the laxity, where we're lulled into, the only way that we're used to relaxing is by sleep, and we've conflated the two together. So as we relax to do our meditation, then we become sleepy. Often it's because we've learnt to read ourselves to sleep at night as a child. What a terrible conflation that is. So we've got to be able to relax and keep our mind alert. I mean, sometimes just thinking of those two things, they just don't even go together. But if you sit down to meditate and you get sleepy, it's because you're exhausted and you need to sleep, not because you can't meditate. And also because we have this habit of the only way we relax is sleeping. So you've got to be able to relax and keep your mind alert. And then in a relaxed frame of mind, focus on whatever without succumbing to the allure of unconsciousness. Oh, how nice it is. You know, when we're getting sleepy, it's a nice feeling. We're lulled into it. That also is cognitive fusion. It's a nice feeling, but it's no good for us. So you just go, yep, I've got that feeling of delirium and unconsciousness sweeping over me. It's not all of me. Go down a gear. Don't get sucked into the allure of it. And then you'll be fine. So I can tell you a little story about this. If any of you have been to Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teachings, for instance, he can teach for quite a long time, for many, many hours. And also because they're so intense, it can be quite overwhelming. You can kind of get the deliriums and get really sleepy. And often in class, in the teachings, you might see people doing the nodding off thing, you know, where they're swaying backwards and forwards. You just want to hold them so they don't tip over. So I was one of those people up at Chenrezig Institute, one teaching, and I just knew, oh my God, here comes this wave like of catatonia coming over me. And I was doing the whole thing like this, trying to stay upright. And I also thought, I've got no control over myself. So I had to sit on my hands, and I didn't know, even like I may have even said something in my delirium. I just had, it was this epic battle to stay awake. And I was determined. I was going to stay awake no matter what. And to this day, I have no idea what the teaching was about. I have no idea if I was talking in my sleep. I was having hallucinations. I was hearing other things. Like, it was just, and like abject failure at that teaching. But that determination that I had, I am not going to just clunk and go to sleep. So as they say, you know, I lost the battle, but I won the war. And after that fateful day, I've never been overwhelmed like that with sleep ever again. So I was sitting there, and, you know, the first, you happy, distracted, and then you start coming down, and then the sleep wave comes over me, and it's a wave. It just goes over me, and it goes. And it goes because I don't get sucked into the lull of it. And I don't get sucked into the lull of it because I was determined that day. That was it. Like, I severed my relationship with it. and I've been free of that epic battle ever since. I'm so grateful to it. I mean, that's the blessings of the guru right there. That's the inner teaching. So that's the object. Then when we're actually doing the attention part, the actual meditation, choose an object of meditation and focus your mind on it. So it's important to choose a virtuous object of meditation. So even if you're just watching your breath, you've got to have a reason why. It's not just to develop my concentration to become a good shoplifter. It's to calm my mind for the benefit of me and society and all sentient beings all the way up to enlightenment. And if we're going to spend so much time on an object, choose something that's really inspiring. So an image of the Buddha, or His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or Chenrezig, or Tara, or Manjushri, something that keeps on giving, you know, that's a really deep object. If you're going to spend so much time, you don't just want to concentrate on a lolly or a can of soup or something, you know, and you don't want to just focus on an external thing like music or a flame, because we're trying to bring our focus inwards. So having our focus be from the senses, is actually not what we're doing. Avoid the laxity and excitement, and try and achieve and maintain stability, clarity, and intensity. And this is why I put a picture of a clock here, because it's not about making the time longer and longer. It's about keeping the time fairly short that you meditate for or that you study for, and just making the quality better. Because often, if you're tempted to just make that time longer and longer, what you're doing is having subtle laxity, where you're just kind of bleeming out. And that's nice because you're having, it's a bit of respite, but it doesn't have any long-term effect. And in fact, it can just dull our mind. It doesn't help us solve any problems or work on developing our wisdom or anything like that. So we just want to get better at sitting, relaxing, focusing, analyzing what's going on, and then sitting with the conclusion. So that should give you a good place to start with concentration. Okay, so then we've got the next one, higher training in ethics. What's right, what's wrong, how it all depends. So this is the third one, the third training that we need to become a good human being. And ethical conduct, what it actually means is we restrain from harming others. We abandon, it's called abandoning harmful physical and verbal actions. So, you know, we've got body, speech, mind. So the main way that we interact with the world is through communication, our speech, and then kind of secondary physically how we relate to others. So ethics means that it's harm minimization. We abandon the harmful physical and verbal actions. And what's motivating us is this altruistic intention, the determination to become completely free from cyclic existence. Now, what normally motivates us with ethics isn't that. Normally, our sense of ethics, it starts off coming from outside. So it's we act in a particular way because we don't want to get in trouble when we're a kiddie. We don't want to get in trouble from our parents. And that's what determines what we do or don't do. And if we do something, we get away with it, we think good. So, you know, firstly, we learn our ethics from outside of us, you know, carrot and stick approach. Then later on, it's whether we get away with it with the law, whether we're caught cheating on taxes, whether we're caught speeding, and we think if we're not caught, it's okay. So this still, it's the power of our ethical behavior is determined by what comes from outside, by other people and other things. And so this means that when there is no one out there overseeing us, we lose our ethics. It happens over and over again. And a classic example of this is social media. So on social media, there is no witness there. There's no human being there that we're saying things to and they burst into tears and we see the response. And because of that, it's incredibly easy for people to get really shouty and put everything in capitals and say horrible, mean things. It just comes out so easily. Why? Because there is no witness. So that indicates that our sense of ethics is determined from what other people think of us and whether we're caught. It's not coming from within. It's not coming from a natural sense of what's right or wrong. And so it's not sustainable. So when I was little, we in school, we all got to read Lord of the Flies. I don't know if you read that, but it's an extraordinary book about exactly this. What happens when a bunch of kids are stuck on an island with no teachers to tell them what's what. So then we might have ethics as we grow up. We might have ethics because we think we should be a good person. And again, if you have that word should, people should act like this, or I should act like that, or I shouldn't act like this or that. Again, it's kind of like in beginning to internalize the ethics, but it's still not part of us. And that might be because through fear or guilt or wanting to impress others, not wanting to embarrass ourselves, not wanting to be caught out by our lama or our guru or our partner. It might be bargaining with karma. If I'm a good person, then things will work out well for me. So all of this also is not sustainable, and we can live our whole life in this mistaken way of thinking, well, all I have to do is act nicely to everybody else, and then people will act nicely to me. And as we find out, that's not how it works. We can be kind and tolerant to everybody, and people can be really nasty to us. But that shouldn't stop us continuing to be kind and tolerant. It's got to come like from really an understanding of human nature and the afflictions. So that's how wisdom supports our ethics. The other thing with ethics is that it's really about embodying our ethics. We have to live them. It's not enough just to say, these are my values, family values, or, you know, I'm not a racist, or I'm not sexist. And in our culture, in our post-truth world, pretty much this is what happens. But all people have to do is just say it as if that's enough. So we get all sorts of politicians. So, you know, just recently in Queensland, where I am in Australia, you know, we had some politicians saying, you know, we respect our Indigenous folk. You know, we respect Aboriginal communities living in this particular state. But at the same time that they were saying that, it might have been, you know, National Sorry Day or something, they were opening Australia's biggest alcohol distributor supermarket store. So a mega alcohol store in that state, at the same time saying, we respect our Indigenous peoples. So this was actually in a community that wanted to stay dry, a dry community. And this happens over and over again. People go, oh, I'm not racist, but... And again, it's like, I'm actually not the one who can say whether I'm racist or not. It's the other people that can tell me whether I'm racist or not. All I can say is, I don't want to be racist. So we've got to make sure that our values, we don't just say, oh, I value the family, or I value, you know, this or that. We've got to actually live it, embody it. And this is really, really tricky. A lot of it comes from what our motivation is. And actually, Yangtze Rinpoche says that keeping ethics becomes happiness itself. So it's not that we're bargaining. If I act well, then things will turn out well. Acting well, acting ethically means we're harmonious within ourselves. It's happiness itself. So, you know, if you've done something, your conscience is playing on you. It's not a nice feeling, but that's evidence that you have ethics, right? You've done something and it doesn't sit well. So now you're out of joint, out of harmony. That's a bad feeling, but it's evidence that you have goodness there. So the way to do is to just try and do your very, very best, because that's actually what creates happiness within your own heart. It's what makes us confident. It's sustainable for the long term, and it's not a transactional thing. It means that even if people act badly to us, even if they betray us, we won't lose our equilibrium. We won't lose our kindness. We won't lose our Mahayana altruistic motivation. we'll understand where they come from. We'll be able to, you know, disassociate ourselves and do whatever we need to stay safe, but we won't lose our touch with our inner goodness. So questions or comments about this? Anything that's come up? Brianna, you're kind of smiling at me. Do you have a question or a comment? No. Christy, how about you? How are you going?
Well, dissociate yourself, whatever you need to do. Maybe you could elaborate on that a little.
Yeah. So again, often what happens is, you know, we try and be a good person and be kind and everything, and then things go wrong in a relationship or people at work or something like that. And we can't get away from the situation. And so what happens is we disassociate our heart. So we're still there physically in the presence of people, but we shut down emotionally. And that way we kind of try and protect ourselves. Whereas actually what we should try and do is, in a situation that's really untenable or destructive, to try and actually leave that situation, because on a relative level, it could actually just get worse. And in our heart, stay close. In our heart, still care about them. But actually we do the opposite. We still hang out there, but we just shut down emotionally, and we become cold and insensitive to others. And it spreads to everything. You know, we shut down to our enemy. We're also shut down now to our family. So Lama Yeshe, you know, he says, with our enemies, keep them physically distant, but close in your heart. Now, that also means that, like, if you're in a dysfunctional relationship, it's better to leave it. Because it's just, you know, if as two human beings, you can't get it together, it's going to end in tears. And so if you can end it, then you still got that room in your heart to care about them. Whereas, you know, many times we stay in the job that is soul destroying, or we stay in the relationship that is dysfunctional, and then everybody suffers and we shut down emotionally. Now, there might be times where you cannot move, you cannot quit your job because it's the only one available. So then you have to find some inner space where you have an inner environment where it's safe, so that then you can still, from your side, the relationship is still okay, even if from their side it's terrible. That's much more difficult. And even then, at work, you probably just have to go and lock yourself in the toilet and breathe to, 10 deep breaths, physically get some space so that you don't lose your temper, so that you don't say those things. So physically, you've created a barrier so that in your heart, you can still stay a good person.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's quite tricky, but the long-term benefit, we know what happens, of course. If we don't abide by our ethics, then even the good things that we do become tarnished. So it's kind of like the if the container is broken, how can it hold anything? So we just have to think about, a politician might do some good things, but if they're, sexually assaulting their secretary at work, that's going to nullify all the good things that they've done. Or priests, Christianity has done enormous good in the world, but it just takes one priest to abuse children, and it wipes out it disconnects us, it wipes out all that goodness of the good-heartedness of Christianity. So, or in a business may do some good in the community, but if they're also polluting the environment, it nullifies it all. So it's the same with our life. Just because we're getting away with it, or just because people don't know, for ourselves, it pollutes our own happiness. We can't sit well in our own skin. And it also means that, we can be working for a Dharma center, we can be volunteering or whatever. But if we're nasty to our parents or our family, it nullifies all that good work. It tarnishes it. So ethics, it's for our own benefit as well as for the benefit of others. And we're only going to trust ourselves and have confidence. We all want self-worth and self-confidence, but it's only possible if we have ethics, if we sit well in our own skin. So how do we get started with this? Well, I hope I don't run out of time. Really simple. We've got the vows that we have, the promises that we've made. So we've got marriage vows. If you're married, you've got marriage vows. You've got to keep your marriage vows. And people don't like to hear this when they come to my class, because you think, oh, it should be obvious. But it's not. How many people go and have affairs? We have, Scouts vows, citizenship vows. Then we have our professional code of conduct. So we expect, for instance, a kindergarten teacher or a first responder or a fireman or a surgeon to look after everybody equally, regardless whether they're rich or poor, regardless whether they're a white supremacist or whether they're a monk or a nun. We expect this professional code of conduct, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche again and again and again says, become an inner professional. We expect it of our, society rules and jobs. We can do it ourselves too. It's not a big stretch. We can be an inner professional and treat everybody with equal care, regardless of whether we like them or not. We don't have to like them. Just like a kindergarten teacher doesn't have to like all the kiddies, but they can definitely look after them all. And respecting the laws of the land. So we've got to abide by the law. And even if the law is unfair, we still have to abide by it as a good Buddhist, for instance, and then work to change the laws. So, in Australia, it was, I can't remember now, but up to very, very recently, it was illegal to be a homosexual. I mean, can you imagine? And only just recently, we got marriage equality, finally, so we've got to abide by the laws of the land, but we've also got to work to change unfair laws. And if, as a Buddhist, I get caught breaking the law, that's not just me, is it? That's like going to reflect on the entire Buddhist Center, on all of the FPMT, and on all of Buddhism. So regardless of what I think of the law, I've got to abide by it. So ethics, how to act. So when we're with others, when in company, watch your physical actions and your speech. So at least act like a good person. This is professionalism, isn't it? This is how we do it. We act professionally. So we've got to be professional in our relationships, not just in our job, not just motivated by money, but motivated by concern for how to live harmoniously in society. Try to cultivate friends with ethics, not just friends with benefits, right? But friends with ethics. If we want to have good, strong ethics, we have to make sure we spend time with people that are better than us, that are a good influence on us, that make it easy for us to be the kind of person we want to, that actually embody our values. How easy is it to be kind and compassionate when we're around our gurus? Because they inspire us. So instead of getting all competitive with people, we've got to make sure we cultivate friends with ethics. At least once a week, spend time with someone that is a better human being than you. Really, really important. And, if we don't, then no wonder we're exhausted. become active in civil society. Are we part of the solution? No, then we're part of the problem. So if we try and do our part, even if it's just getting out there and voting, it really counts. Active in civil society, part of it, contributing to it, not just sucking off from it. And having a sense of humility and respect for others. So Geshe Langri Tangpa's verses of thought transformation, you know, to always put oneself lower than others. This is a dynamite way to become incorruptible. That's how to do it. You put yourself lower than others. Then you can never be bribed. You can never be, you can never have your values besmirched. You'll always respect others. You'll never get caught out doing something embarrassing. It's just this amazing safety net. You put yourself lower than others, you're automatically respecting everybody. Even the lowest cleaner won't be low. There'll be someone to be respected. So if we want to be incorruptible, we do it through developing this sense of humility, that there's always something that people are better at than us, that we can learn from. There's always something that someone can share that we can benefit. And every living being, they matter because they have feelings. Even if we don't like them, they have feelings just like me. They get miserable when they have the flu, just like me. So for that, then we respect them and care for them, and then we'll be incorruptible. Then our ethics will be safe. Well, and then when we're on our own, then we practice good mental hygiene. So with others, we watch our body and speech. When we're by ourselves, we watch our mind. And mental hygiene, meaning we direct our mind. We use our concentration and mindfulness to notice, oh, what am I ruminating on? What am I spending all of my emotional energy on? And getting some mental discipline, mental hygiene. Proudly uphold your code of conduct. So that's like the super cape here, Superman or Superwoman here with lots of arms, you know, like a Chen Rezik or something, you know. So you have your code of conduct, your professionalism you put on, whether it's a code of conduct for being a teacher or a psychologist or a cleaner or a privacy agreement, you put that cloak on and it gives you power. As you little individual, you may not feel it, but you put on that cloak of professionalism, now you have power. Becoming an inner professional, avoiding spiritual materialism. So again, that's, you know, when our motivation gets a bit degenerated and we for instance try and sit up nice and straight at meditation because we want everybody to think we're a good meditator. Or we act very polite around the monks and nuns or the gurus because we want everyone to think we're a good person, but you know, we're really rude to people at home. Or we study and learn all the lists in Buddhism because we want to appear smart. And we don't ask a question because we don't appear like an idiot. So all of these things, that's spiritual materialism, and it really corrupts our good intentions. And recognizing that happiness is a habit too. Happiness is actually something that we do. Remember, it's how we contribute to the world, it's what we become, and it comes from acting ethically. Our happiness is based on ethics. So this, I've got to admit, was a real shock to me. So just as a summary, I pushed the wrong button. So do we have questions about this, about ethics, before I summarize for today? Anything at all about ethical behavior or keeping strong ethics? Okay. Well, let me do the summary. And if you do have a question, then let me know. I'll let Alexis know. So 3 higher trainings, you can see that they're not just for a good life now, but actually if we develop them, if we train in them with this altruistic motivation, they can lead us all the way to liberation and enlightenment and help us lead everyone along with us. So they're dynamite. And we can see if we don't have them, how disastrous our life is. So the analogy here we don't want to end up like funniest home videos, you know, where, you know, like the old people, they think they're still young and they're running around and then they fall over, or someone with a chainsaw or an axe and they go to lift the axe up and they just fall over backwards instead, you know. So we need to have, we have this axe, our wisdom. And, you know, if we're intelligent, then we often just swing our wisdom around willy-nilly, unmoored. With our acts of wisdom, if we don't have the concentration to hold on to it strongly with both hands, what happens with our analysis? We fall off and we end up in nihilism, or we end up all cynical, or we end up irrational. We have the analysis, we go bit, and then we run out of steam and we fall off. We don't come to the right conclusion. We become unreasonable, erratic. So that's because even though we have wisdom, we can't wield it properly because we can't concentrate. So the 2 arms of concentration, really, really, really important. And the ethics, that's the core strength. That's our, the body embodying our ethics, that's our core strength that holds both of them together. So if we don't have core strength, it doesn't matter if we hold on to that axe of wisdom, it's not going to be sustained. So the ethics, our core strength, that's our foundation. That is the absolute foundation for success in anything, worldly things or enlightenment. Concentration, the 2 arms, informed by love and interdependence, like the 2 arms, the 2 wings of the bird. That's what motivates our concentration. So we're not motivated by fear, bargaining, attachment, lust, craving, wealth generation, all of those things. That's not what's motivating us. What's motivating us is love and interdependence. So then we have core strength. We have the 2 wings of the bird, able to hold on and sustain our concentration. Then we can wield that wisdom. And that's the only thing that's going to cut ignorance, the cause of all suffering. If we want to be free of suffering forever, we have to cut the root of ignorance. And the only thing that does that is wisdom. Just being a good person won't do it. So I hope you can see how those 3 higher trainings work together. And just remember this picture, you know, and remember the funniest home videos or TikTok or whatever you've seen, and just go, okay, don't be like that. We've got to incorporate these into our life. There are, for the homework, there are the reflection sheets on the 3 higher trainings. So they're actually 3 higher reflections. There's hardly anything to fill in, just some reflection exercises. And you'll need to be able to go shopping. That one of the exercises is how to go shopping. Is shopping on the path to enlightenment. The other homework is to really focus on becoming an inner professional, like Rinpoche encourages us. And just before we dedicate, so next week we're going to look at not just anxiety and depression, but the hidden wisdom, what they reveal to us, how we can benefit from having anxiety and depression, how we can use it to help us. So are there any comments or questions before we finish and dedicate? Oh yeah, Christy. Yep.
The homework, I did your previous 2 classes, virtually. And those went well. But I don't see homework for 3 higher reflections and becoming an interprofessional. I don't see that anywhere. I think I have pages printed out. Can you tell me what page it is?
I can't remember if I sent the homework sheets as a separate document or if it's all one, but it should look like this. So it's the 3 reflections.
I don't have that.
And the homework, for the other classes looked like this with the questions and then a couple of lines.
I have that.
Yeah, so it's in there. It is in that. No, it's in that document. It should be.
It isn't.
If not, then can you email Alexis or the center and I'll send it out.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Email Alexis at the center.
Yeah, or email and we'll sort it out and get it to you. Yeah, we'll be able to do that. Hey, Alexis.
Christy, you can send me your email address and I'll make sure you get it.
How do I send you that, Alexis? What's your email address?
On chat, you can go to chat and go to host Alexis and put it in.
Host Alexis.
So I'm very pleased that you want to do the reflections and the homework, because really that's what brings it into our experience. That's how to integrate.
Right,
so it just makes me so happy that you want to do them, Christy.
So, Alexis, you are at the Santa Fe Buddhist Center. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying on Zoom where it shows you where it says chat.
Zoom.
You can go to.
Just write your where it goes to. Go to host Alexis and type your email in there.
Got it. Thank you.
So let's dedicate. Let's feel really happy that we've spent the time like this today, and we've invested in ourselves as to become not just good human beings and have a good life, but to contribute in the ultimate best possible way to society and to all living beings. So appreciate this, appreciate your good-heartedness and your efforts. And let's dedicate that we can actually develop these 3 higher trainings and use them to take us all the way, these ultimate skills, all the way, not just for a good life, but all the way to liberation and enlightenment, to be able to offer the very best to all living beings. And then that way, just naturally, the best side effect ever will naturally become happy, wonderful human beings. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your attention. And I hope to see you again next week.
Thank you, Miffy.
Thank you so much, Miffy. Thank you, everybody.